Most people leave jobs once. They build towards something, arrive at it, stay as long as it works, and then leave when it stops working, or when they're asked to. The arc is linear. The departure is usually a conclusion. Zinedine Zidane left Real Madrid 3 times, first as a player in 2006, then as a coach in 2018, then as a coach again in 2021. 3 departures from the same place, under circumstances that were different each time but shared a particular quality. Each one felt, in the moment, like it might be final. And each time, it wasn't. The pattern is unusual enough to be worth examining. Not as a curiosity, not as a question about loyalty or ambition, but as a window into something more specific. What it looks like when a person has a complicated relationship with a place they genuinely love and hasn't figured out how to be done with it. 3 departures. 3 different versions of the same question. And underneath all of them, something that didn't have a clean answer. The first departure wasn't really a choice. When Zidane walked down the tunnel at the Olympiastadion in Berlin after the 2006 World Cup final, red card in his pocket, Italy's celebrations beginning behind him, his playing career was over. He had announced before the tournament that he would retire afterward regardless of the result. The headbutt simply changed the texture of the ending, made it jagged where it might have been smooth. He had spent 5 years at Real Madrid as a player, the Champions League in his first season, La Liga in his second, then 3 years of trying to recapture what the first 2 had felt like. The Galactico project had become unwieldy, the squad too full of talent to be coherent, the results inconsistent in ways that frustrated everyone. By 2006, he had been at the club long enough to know its rhythms, its pressures, the specific quality of expectation that came with wearing that shirt. After Berlin, he returned to Madrid to say goodbye. The reception was warm, but tinged with the complexity of the final. The headbutt had changed the conversation around his legacy in ways that wouldn't settle for years. He left quietly, as he had always preferred. The first departure was complete, and by all logic it should have been permanent. He was 44 when he came back as a coach. 10 years had passed, but the place had stayed with him in ways he may not have fully understood until he found himself returning to it. When Real Madrid appointed Zidane as first-team coach in January 2016, the announcement surprised most of the football world. He had worked with the club's B team and in assistant roles, but he had no experience managing at senior level. The club was in a difficult moment. 3rd manager of the season, inconsistent results, a dressing room that needed steadying. What happened next is one of the strangest stories in recent football history. A man with no head coaching record at senior level took charge of one of the most scrutinized clubs in the world and won the Champions League 5 months later. Then again the following year. Then again the year after that. 3 consecutive European titles, something no manager had achieved in the modern era. The players who worked under him in those years described something consistent: that he made the environment calmer, that he trusted people to do what they were good at rather than trying to control every variable, that his presence in a dressing room changed the atmosphere in ways that were real but difficult to articulate. Sergio Ramos, who had played under many coaches and was not easily impressed, said that Zidane's calmness was unlike anything he had experienced elsewhere. Benzema said he became a better player under Zidane than he had been at any other point in his career. By May 2018, Real Madrid had won their 3rd consecutive Champions League, defeating Liverpool in Kiev. Zidane had been manager for 2.5 years. Everything that could be won had been won. And 2 weeks later, he resigned. The resignation press conference in May 2018 was brief and contained almost no information. He said he believed it was the right moment for everyone. He said the team needed a different voice after 2.5 years of his. He thanked the club and the players. He took no questions that led anywhere revealing. 93 seconds, and then he was gone. The football world spent weeks trying to understand what had actually happened. The theories multiplied. A disagreement with the club's sporting director over transfer targets. Frustration with how decisions were being made above him. A sense that the squad needed rebuilding in ways the club wasn't willing to authorize. None of it was confirmed. Zidane didn't confirm or deny anything, which was consistent with how he had always operated. What was visible, if you looked carefully, was that he left at maximum strength rather than waiting for decline. He had won everything. The squad was aging in certain positions. The next cycle would require significant change, and significant change at Real Madrid comes with significant pressure and significant scrutiny. He could have stayed and managed that transition. He chose not to. There is a particular kind of self-knowledge in leaving before you have to. It requires being honest with yourself about what you want to continue doing and what you don't, about where your energy is and where it isn't. Whether that honesty was fully conscious or something more instinctive is hard to say from the outside. But the timing was not accidental. He left when leaving was still entirely his choice. The 18 months that followed were unusual. Zidane had left at the top of the profession, and the offers came: Paris Saint-Germain, the French national team, Juventus. He declined all of them. He stayed home, spent time with his family, watched football from a distance. By his own account, he needed the space. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it runs against the logic of elite sport, where the assumption is that ambition is always pressing forward, always looking for the next challenge. Zidane's withdrawal wasn't retirement. He was clear that he intended to coach again. It was more like an intermission, a deliberate pause before the next thing, taken at a moment when most people in his position would have moved immediately. What he was pausing from, and what he needed to find again before returning, wasn't something he explained in detail, but the pattern was consistent with how he had always operated. He knew when he needed to be somewhere, and when he needed not to be, and he trusted that knowledge even when it created puzzlement in people watching from outside. In March 2019, Real Madrid called. The club was in its worst period in years. 9th in La Liga, eliminated early from the Champions League. The post-Zidane era having produced exactly the kind of turbulence that the 3 quiet years before it had not. The call was not unexpected. His answer was yes. The second return was harder than the first. The squad was different. Some of the key figures from the 3-title run had left or were older. The younger players brought in to replace them were still finding their level, and the club's standing in Europe had diminished significantly. The conditions that had made the first tenure feel almost effortless were gone. What replaced them was something that looked more like conventional coaching difficulty. Managing a squad in transition, getting results without the depth of talent that had made the previous era special, navigating the expectations of a club that had been accustomed to winning everything and was now losing things. Zidane managed it steadily. Real Madrid won La Liga in 2020, their first league title in 3 years, achieved partly through the consistency he brought to an environment that had been chaotic without him. But the Champions League, the competition that had defined his first tenure, remained just out of reach. They reached the semi-final in 2021 and were eliminated by Chelsea. It was a good run, not a historic one. The standard his first tenure had set was an impossible one to meet, and the second tenure lived in its shadow. In May 2200, with a year remaining on his contract, Zidane resigned again. The statement this time was slightly longer but contained the same essential message. It was the right moment. The club needed something different. He was grateful. The second departure had the same clean quality as the first. No acrimony, no public grievance, no score to settle. He closed the door quietly, as he always did. After the second resignation, the questions were different from those that had followed the first. The first time, there had been genuine puzzlement. Why leave at the absolute peak? This time, the puzzlement was more complicated. The second tenure had been solid, but not transcendent. He had won the league, had taken the team far in Europe, but had not recaptured the particular quality of the 2016-2018 period. Some people concluded that the first tenure had been exceptional circumstances rather than exceptional coaching. Others drew a different conclusion, that Zidane had a specific relationship with Real Madrid that was unlike anything else, that he could produce his best work there and only there, but that the club also had a way of asking things of him that eventually exceeded what he wanted to give, that the departures weren't failures of ambition but accurate readings of his own limits, of what he could sustain and what he couldn't. Since 2000, when he has not returned to coaching. The offers have continued to arrive. The French national team again, Bayern Munich, various other major clubs. He has declined them all, or allowed them to come to nothing. Whether this represents a permanent withdrawal or another intermission, another period of stillness before a third return somewhere, is something only he knows. What the three departures from Real Madrid have in common is this: each one was his choice, made at a moment of his own choosing, under terms he controlled. In a profession where very few people get to leave on their own terms, where most managers are eventually sacked, or stay too long and diminish what they built, that consistency is remarkable. He left 3 times. Each time, the leaving was clean. There is a version of this story that frames the 3 departures as indecision. A man who couldn't commit, who kept coming back because he hadn't finished, who left before he should have and returned before he was ready. It's a coherent reading, but it misses something. The more interesting reading is that Zidane understood something specific about himself and the place, that his relationship with Real Madrid was not linear, not built to be permanent, but genuinely reciprocal in a way that most manager-club relationships aren't. He gave the club things it couldn't get from anyone else. The club gave him something he couldn't find elsewhere. When that exchange was working, it was historic. When it stopped working, he left, both times. The question of whether there will be a third return is less interesting than what the pattern already tells us. A person who knows when to stay and when to go, who can walk away from the most prestigious job in club football twice without being forced out, who manages his own exits with the same composure he brought to everything else. That is a particular kind of self-possession, rare in any field, almost unheard of in football. 3 departures, each one chosen, each one clean. Whatever comes next, or doesn't, the record is already unusual. He left Real Madrid more times than almost anyone has left anywhere. And each time he left, it was on his own terms. In a sport that tends to take those terms away from people eventually, that matters more than it might seem.